Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Castle Dunbar, Scotland. January 1338. Another massive boulder slams against the side of the sturdy stone castle, launched from a heavy catapult. More giant rocks impact the battlements, fired on the orders of William Montagu, the Earl of Salisbury, a warrior knight in the service of the English King Edward III. Salisbury has dealt the Scots a punishing defeat at the Battle of Berwick, captured the city of Edinburgh, and now seeks to claim Castle Dunbar and seize complete control of the region. It should be an easy task. The Lord of the Manor is gone on campaign, leaving behind just a token force, who must surely fall under the might of this barrage, or who will be simply awed into submission by the sheer size of the English force. The artillery assault pauses for a moment. There's movement on the battlement. Is it a flag of surrender? Or defenders, archers, men with pots of boiling pitch? No, it's women. Dozens of women and girls in pretty dresses, adorned with jewelry. Their hair and makeup is done. They look like they're going out to a royal ball. The women walk the battlements, surveying the army and the destruction wrought by the king's artillery. They withdraw white handkerchiefs, and where they find dents, scuff marks, and gouges, they delicately dust them off. The lady of the castle emerges behind them. She is Agnes Randolph, Countess of Moray, ruler of Castle Dunbar. She smiles at Lord Salisbury and waves her hand at him with a practiced genteelness before joining her handmaidens in dusting off the battlements. Perhaps this siege will not be as easy as Salisbury may have suspected. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am joined today by a very special guest. She is a New York Times bestselling author. She's the author of the Hannah Vogel series, the Joe Tesla series, and co-author of the Blood Gospel series with James Rollins. We are joined today by Rebecca Cantrel. Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the show. It's awesome to have you here on Badass of the Week.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been a longtime fan of the show and before that of the website. And it was kind of something my son read a lot when he was young, even though there's a lot of cursing. But it really got him interested in history because of the stories that you tell and the people that you bring to life and the way that you bring them to life. Although I did have to debrief him on various curse words. So thanks for that, Ben.
I have to explain what some of that stuff means. Yeah, the curse words, I find that like it was like weirdly helpful to getting reluctant readers to read because it feels like you're reading something bad, even though you're learning something about history in the process. And that's awesome. That's so funny. We met like a long time ago. We've known each other for a long time, I feel like.
Yeah, I think you came to one of my book signings in Seattle, like in 2011, 10?
Maybe it was 11. But yeah, I went to one of your book signings. I remember we were walking around Seattle afterwards. And this was kind of like at the beginning of like both of our careers as authors, I feel like, because I think maybe it was for A Trace of Smoke.
It might have been for A Trace of Smoke. They called you my ninja. They're like, you have a ninja here in the store. Because I guess they'd pulled up your ninja photo.
Yes, for the first Badass book, they were like, we want to include an author photo. And I was like, I don't know if people are going to buy me as like, if they see what I look like, they're going to buy me as a expert on badasses. So I submitted a picture of myself wearing a ninja mask. It's actually a black t-shirt. I just stuck my eyes through the neck hole and then tied the arms behind me. And so it looks like a ninja mask, but it's just a black t-shirt. And so I'm doing a ninja pose wearing a ninja mask. And that's my author photo for the first like 2 Badass books.
Well, that's the kind of ninja ingenuity that they needed, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think, yeah, it was like, I mean, this would have been like 15, 16 years ago at this point. So like, I remember you telling me then that your son was a big fan of the website, and then you just showed me a picture, and I was like, oh, he's grown up since
Yes.
since he was reading the website.
He was like 9 or 10.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And he's 25 now. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
the timeline.
I get guys that come up to me at I get fully grown adult men that come up to me at comic book conventions, and they're like, I've been reading you since I was like 8. And I was like, oh no, I'm old now.
Yeah, that time, it just marches
It
on, which is
never
kind of
stops.
something I address in the book, what we'll talk about later.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay, so you are, I mean, just to kind of introduce you to our listeners, you are the author of the Hannah Vogel series, which is kind of a historical thriller series set in 1930s Germany. And,
Yes.
Trace of Smoke is the first book in that series. You won the Bruce Alexander Award for that, the McCavity Award in 2010. And you've also done a series on Joe Tesla, who is another one where it's got a historical tie-in. He's loosely related to Nikola Tesla. And the first book in that series, The World Beneath, also received awards. It got the International Thriller Writers Best Ebook Award in 2013. And then you did a series with James Rollins, which is awesome. The first book in the Order of Sanguine series, Blood Gospel, was a New York Times bestseller. So I always love that. Like, I'm so jealous that you got that, because you just never. You're never not going to be New York Times bestselling author Rebecca Cantrel, which is so awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, they're going to put it on my tombstone now.
Yes, it'll be the first line of the obituary.
Yeah, I'm thinking beloved mother and wife, but okay.
No, they put that after. Yeah,
They put that after.
She's
It's
survived
true.
by a loving family. Blah blah blah.
Blah, 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 blah. But let's talk about vampires first.
Yes.
That's
Let's
what
talk
that's
about.
what they're going to put on my tombstone. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, the vampires come first. You did vampire Catholic Church biblical history stuff, and that's the lead.
Yes.
And so I guess that's kind of where I want to start for talking today. Is we've got a couple of really badass characters from history that we're going to get into their stories. But what I want to start with is you've done a lot of work for 10 years now, 15 years now on a lot of historical works. And so I kind of wanted to start by saying, talk about your process, because I've never written historical fiction before, but I assume it is just as much research as writing nonfiction. You have to kind of know everything inside and out. So what does your process look like for researching a book?
Well, so for the Hannah Vogel books, which are the first books I wrote, they're set in 1930. The first one is in 1931 Berlin, and they go up through 1938. And I am an exhaustive researcher. So the first thing I try to do is so I do it backwards. A lot of people start with historical context and then go forward, but I like to get primary source materials as often as I can. So that means things that people wrote in the time. So for the Hannah Vogel era, there's a lot of material out there. I bought a set of newspapers that were bound for the Berlin Illustrierte Zeitung that I happened to buy off eBay from somebody in Canada. And that had it was in German, of course, and it had
but you speak German, so that's
I speak German. So yeah, that wasn't a problem. So they had all of the ads, right? So you can find out, what did people smoke? What stockings did they wear? What toothpaste did they use?
That's good.
And how they
really
appealed to people to use. Yeah, so there's so much stuff. And then there's articles in there. Like one of them was an article about a Zeppelin that had gone from Germany in 1931 to Antarctica. And they had all these pictures of these guys in Antarctica walking around on the ice with a giant blimp behind them. And so there's all these kind of images that you see, and you realize they had jokes in there, terrible dad jokes with cartoons. And so you get to see like all of this vibe of what it was like then. And then I started reading the diaries of people who lived then, who were in fact incredible badasses. So like there's Count Harry Kessler. Oh my God, the Red Count. And he was this guy who was allegedly an illegitimate son of the Kaiser. And he was in the nobility. His mom was nobility. And he was also like gay and kind of out. And he was a diplomat. He negotiated the World War I treaty in Poland. He spoke a bunch of languages, and he just went out and did shit. So like in Berlin, there was a sorry for swearing. There was a
No, it's
Spartacus
okay. It's
uprising
badass the week.
in 1918, and people were mad about the war, and they were protesting, and they had guns, and they took over parts of the city. And so, they were shooting people as they were walking down the streets. And so he's all, I need to see what's going on. So he marches out, they shoot at him, but he's just been through a war. So he's pretty blasé. And he gets all the stuff and he writes it down in his diary. And he was like the epicenter of all that was intellectual in Germany and Europe at the time. They came to his house. So if you get his book, The Red Count, which is the Diaries of Count Harry Kessler, and you look in the index of all the people who visited him, you get Albert Einstein, you get Josephine Baker, you get Hitler, you get Röhm, you get everybody was there at his parties. And so he's just at the center of everything, and he writes it down. He keeps this daily diary of all the stuff that's going on. So that's fascinating stuff.
Wow. So yeah, he's that's super interesting. Yeah. I love those kinds of stories where this person who, might not be super well known in history, but they're this great focal point for tying all of the other characters in your story together. But Rebecca, before we keep going, we need to talk about Black Agnes. We need to talk about the badass this week. So let's take a really quick break. And when we come back, we are going to tell the story of Black Agnes Dunbar. Okay, welcome back. We are going to talk about Black Agnes Dunbar. We didn't mention her too much before the break, but she is a true badass. It's a story I didn't know before you suggested it to me, and when I started getting into it, I was obsessed with it when you sent it to me, and I kind of dove deep into it. And so I'd kind of like to spend a little bit of time now talking about Black Agnes Dunbar, who is awesome, and I think would be a really good badass character to talk about. So, do you wanna start the story?
Sure. So the Countess of Dunbar, also known as Black Agnes, was a Scottish countess in the 1300s, and in 1338, her husband goes off to war, and she's in charge of the castle, which was really, really common. So ladies in the medieval time, were in charge of the castle when the men were done. So they did most of the work, managing the crops, managing the workers, making sure there was food for winter, and also defending against attackers. So the English and the Irish are at war, and the Irish think, okay, the man is gone. This is the perfect time to attack. So they send troops to her castle, which of course is a terrible, terrible, terrible mistake.
Because Agnes is awesome. Yes. So we have talked on the show about William Wallace. We did a William Wallace episode. We talked about his battles with Edward Longshanks. Wallace is killed, but Robert the Bruce picks up. He defeats the English at Bannockburn in 1314. Scotland gets its independence. And that's kind of where we ended that story. Scotland lives happily ever after. Okay, sort of. Robert the Bruce dies, and there's a succession war, of course. And so, like you said, in 1332, we have a new king in England, Edward III, and Scotland is having basically a succession war between Robert the Bruce's very young son and the son of the guy who was king before Robert the Bruce. And so England backs the guy that's going to support England, and maybe we can reunify and reconquer Scotland. They attack in 1338. They capture Berwick. They win this big battle. The Earl of Salisbury, who's going to be the villain of our story, William Montagu, he's a knight. He's a tournament fighter. He's a great warrior. He's great at hand-to-hand combat. He's a good jouster. He's been friends with King Edward III since forever. He helped him overthrow his mother and Roger Mortimer. He defeated the Scots at this big battle at Halidon Hill. He takes Berwick and he moves on to Castle Dunbar, which is pretty close to Edinburgh. It's just east of Edinburgh on the coast. And he arrives January 1338. The war has been going on for a couple of years now when he gets here. And the lord of the castle is Lord Patrick Dunbar. He's gone. He's fighting somewhere else. The city has fallen. There's a big army surrounding the castle. and they get word, like you said, that the only person there is the lady of the house, Agnes, Lady Agnes Randolph, Countess of Moray. And the Earl of Salisbury sends a letter like, hey, surrender. And he gets a response. And the response is, for Scotland's king, I hold my house. He pays me meat and fee. And I will keep my good old house while my house will keep me.
Yes, and it's worth pointing out she's the great niece of Robert the Bruce.
Yes, so she's from a really powerful family. So she's born around 1300. She grows up during this William Wallace, Robert the Bruce War. She's 14 when Bannockburn happens. They call her Black Agnes because she has like dark hair, a dark complexion, and I would say also like a dark sense of humor that we're going to see repeatedly as this goes on.
Yes.
And yeah, so her dad was Thomas Randolph. He was the first Earl of Moray, nephew of Robert the Bruce, really early supporter. He had won a big battle to capture Dunbar Castle from the English during that war. He led a division of infantry at Bannockburn, and he was actually the regent. We said that there's a succession dispute, and one of the claimants to the throne was Robert the Bruce's young son, and Black Agnes's dad is the regent for that son, and so he's involved here. He helps negotiate the marriage of Agnes to Patrick Dunbar. At 20, she marries him. Dunbar is also a powerful lord. They have this huge amount of land. They have this really important castle. This castle is very important strategically and militarily. And so, yeah, she's a big deal. And
she's a big deal.
You know, she's here with this kind of skeleton crew because he took most of the good knights with him. He thought he was going to fight in the war. So he left behind just the bare bones guys.
Just a few guys who are there to defend it. And so she doesn't surrender the castle. And the first thing he does is they catapult things at the castle, as was their wont. They catapult lead and they catapult rock, and, you know, they make dents in the castle, hoping that she will give up. But instead, she and allegedly her, but definitely her ladies of waiting, go out and walk along the parapet of the castle where it has been damaged, and they take out their little handkerchiefs, which in my imagination are white, and they carefully dust off all of the places that they have damaged.
Yes.
Like, it's such a wonderful, contemptuous way to minimize the damage and to make them look like fools. Because the damage is so minor to the Scottish that they're just dusting it off with a handkerchief.
Yeah.
It's such a great symbolic act.
Yeah. So the castle is a serious castle. It overlooks Berwick, which is a suburb of Edinburgh. It's, you know, you've got Dunbar Harbor to the north on three sides. There's steep ocean cliffs. You can't get in that way. There's only one way to approach, and it's past a 70-foot high wall with a citadel inside it. And she doesn't have a lot of people, but she's got a very defensible position with these big giant walls. He launches all this stuff out of the catapult. And then, and they're dressed up. So in the pictures, they are like in the artwork from the time period, they are white handkerchiefs. And the women of the castle go out there in their finest clothes. Like they dress up super fancy to go out and kind of dust off the catapult dings.
It is such a wonderful FU to them. And then the next thing he does is he builds this siege engine where he's called Sow, which he's going to use to throw bigger rocks and destroy the castle wall. So he once again asks her to surrender, and then she has some great quote that you probably know, but I forget what it was, where she says, you know, it's going to spill forth its pigs. Be careful with your sow because it's going to spill forth its pigs, by which she means it's going to knock out all the guys in them. And then she has her men take one of the giant rocks that they just knocked into her castle, and she only has because they shot it at her. And then she takes that rock and she has them drop it on the siege engine, destroying it utterly.
So this Sow is like a giant battering ram. So if you play like medieval Total War or Rome Total War, they have this huge battering ram, right? That they're just going to ram in the front door of the castle. They're going to go right up to the front door and bang it in with this giant battering ram. But to protect them, they built this like wooden roof over top of the ram. So the guys it takes whatever, like 20 people to ram this thing back and forth to bang the door open. But they're protected from above from arrows because they built this wooden thing, kind of like a turtle shell above them. But then when they get up to the doors, all that lead and the rocks, everything you were saying, she saved all of it. and she just pushes it off the walls of the castle, and it drops down onto the battering ram and crushes it and breaks the siege engine, smushes the guys underneath it.
Such bad planning on their part. Like the gate, and that once again is a wonderful symbolic act because she's taking what they threw at her and using it to destroy them.
Yes,
on
and one thing you
purpose.
see about Agnes a lot is that she's present for all stages of this siege. The siege is going to last for 5 months, and for all 5 months, she's always visible to the enemy and to her own people, because there's no reinforcements coming. There's still a war going on. People know that she's under siege and that she's holding out, but no help is coming. She's going to have to do this herself. There's this great story where at one point the Earl of Salisbury, he tries to bribe the gatekeepers to he tries to bribe the gatekeepers to let him in. Here's a bunch of money, you'll go free, I'll give you land or whatever. And the gatekeepers are like, sure, come tonight, we'll open the gate for you. And he comes at night with some of his knights. They open the gate. He goes in. They close the gate behind him. There's a second gate in front of him, and there's a bunch of guys there with arrows shooting arrows at him, and he barely escapes with his life.
They keep one guy, though, so they can taunt him with this one guy. And then I love this. They take her brother. Her brother is fighting. He was imprisoned, and they bring him to the castle, and they say, we're going to kill him in front of you if you don't surrender.
Yeah, they walk him out there with a noose around his neck, her brother. So she sends down the message that says, I'm next in line to inherit after he dies, so go right ahead. You'd be doing me a favor. And that works, whether she believes that or not. And I imagine she probably doesn't. Like, Salisbury is like, well, dang.
So they don't kill her brother. They send him back to prison. He eventually gets out and battles some more. But yeah, he's like, I have no left for you. And I just love how she does what we would call modern day trolling. Like everything they try to do to Agnes, she just turns around and uses it against them. From the handkerchiefs showing how ineffectual they are, to destroying them with their own ammunition, to saying, fine, kill my brother. I get money if you do. Like everything they try to do fails.
Trying to bribe the gate guards. She keeps the money. They take the money. She keeps the money. She almost kills him. He runs away, and then she writes him a letter that says, like, farewell, Montagu. I'd hoped you'd join us for supper.
Yes. Oh, speaking of supper, so at some point, so it's a siege, right? Nobody can get food. No food in or out. The troops are on rations. Her people are on rations.
Yeah, for months, right? It's like 19 weeks.
And someone manages to come in, I forget who, through this other entrance.
Alexander Ramsay of Dalhousie. So he's one of these guys. Like, he's not people know that this story, like, she's famous at this point already because she's holding out. It's like, the lady of the castle is defending the great Scottish spirit and
taunting.
And taunting. And this Alexander Ramsay, he's just a guy he's like a knight that happens to be in the area, right? And he's like, I gotta do something. And so he gets 40 men and 2 boats, and he's gonna try to like help with whatever he can. She has a secret entrance. She gets in touch with him, and she tells him that she has a secret entrance through the impenetrable cliff face on the water side, and she's gonna open it for him. Come this night, and I'll raise the gate, and you can come on in.
So he comes in. She has food, so she gets all of this food, and she takes and bakes a cake and sends dinner and a cake and wine out to the Montague, who is besieging the castle, and says, I know your rations are lean, so here's some tasty food.
Yes, she sends it out with like the gates open. The next morning, the gates open, and it's those ladies in waiting you were talking about. It's like 4 women in like their prettiest dresses with like a white flag and like a snack tray of like wine and meats and breads. Like, here you go. We made you breakfast.
And then
and just marching out in full view of the defenders of the castle and the troops and the English troops. And so like everybody is seeing this. It's just awesome, right? It's like the ultimate like,
and they're living off boiled turnips and dried beef at this point, right? So, and they see this feast that she has, and like the psychological effect of knowing that you've done this siege to starve them out and they're eating better than you are.
Yeah.
It's
Because
just
he's in
so
enemy territory. He's deep
yeah.
inside Scotland. Like he's not in his home turf. Like he's trying to get supplies to and from his army, but he's got to move through Scottish territory. And like the Scottish they don't have an army that can fight his army, but they have guerrillas who can they have rebels and stuff who can attack shipping and logistics. And like he's having a hard time getting reinforcements and money and food. Like he's struggling because the Scots are making his life hard because he's in enemy territory. And now she's like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, we have beautiful women and delicious food. We're fine.
Yeah.
And
you can't knock down my walls. You can't get in here. I'm not giving up anytime soon. So we're at an impasse. And like people are, these guys are hungry. They're tired. They're dying, right? They're shooting arrows at each other throughout this 19
this
weeks.
Whole thing. Mm-hmm. They're dying. They're starving. They probably have, they're sleeping on the ground. It's raining on them. It's January in Scotland.
Yeah, it's cold.
It's cold. It's windy. Nobody likes it.
Mm-hmm. There's disease, all that stuff.
There's disease. And so it's just wonderful, once again, how she holds out, but also how she wins the war of ideas, like the visual, symbolic war of morale. And I think everything she did was just this contemptuous taunting and showing them that they did not have the power that they thought they had, and that she's fine and she's doing better than them. And that kind of way of sapping their morale, where they're like, okay, we can throw rocks at her all day with the catapult and she's just going to dust them off. She's going to have, beautiful women dust them off with handkerchiefs. Then she's going to throw them back and destroy us. She has better food than we do. And just this kind of she just totally understood how to troll and how to control the narrative.
Right. And it's just like, it ends up being kind of what you make of it. Because at the end of the day, she's heavily outnumbered. Yes. And there's this constant, without this kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say power of positive thinking, but without this kind of energy leadership coming out of her, there is every defender of that and every civilian living in that castle, it's we're one night away from them making an attack and breaking in here and killing all of us, right? Yeah. Which, for 19 weeks of that is a long time to be worried about death every single day.
Every day, yeah. And
people to get out there with this attitude of just yeah, whatever, I'm not scared of these guys. They don't know what they're talking about. That is powerful. That's a powerful narrative to inspire the people that are fighting for you and to demoralize the enemy.
And it works. So after 5 months, reinforcements come, drive them out, they give up because it was too expensive and they didn't think they could win.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
They didn't. And it's the only real defeat of Salisbury's career. He continues on. Wow. He fights in the 100 Years' War. He becomes the Marshal of England at one point. He becomes the first king of the Isle of Man. He's referred to as the King of Man, which I think is interesting. He's the Isle of Man. But he fights in the 100 Years' War. He's the Marshal of England. He's a big deal. He wins a bunch of battles in France, fighting for Edward III, who is, very famous conqueror was very successful in the 100 Years' War in France. And then Agnes stays at Dunbar Castle and moves between her properties. She dies in old age. She dies in 1369 we don't know when she was born, roughly around 1300, but she would have been at least 70 when she died. And she's remembered by a song. And the story goes that the song was invented by the English as they were riding away, although who knows where this comes from. And I don't know the tune of the song, but the lyrics are, "She makes a stir in tower and trench, that brawling, boisterous Scottish wench. Came I early, came I late, I found Agnes at the gate."
Yes.
And I just love the idea that she was just kind of always there, like Holy Grail with the French castle in Monty Python, right?
Exactly.
Always
she was
there.
This guy, yeah. And she's a woman. She's a woman in a dress. She's not a great lord or a powerful fighter. She's a woman in a dress with I forget how many knights she had, but it was not enough. It was not a lot of knights. And
she's employing the women of the castle a lot, right? That's another thing that you see, very prominent in this story is there are a lot of women involved in the defense of this castle, which is cool.
Yeah. So Agnes of Dunbar, I loved her, and I just I just that defiance is something that I that I brought into the book. The idea that
Yeah.
you can fight, and even when it seems lost, you can fight on, and you can control the narrative, and you can um, win against bigger forces if you just hold on long enough. At least that's what I hope. That's what Agnes did,
Yes.
and that's what my character does. She, fights through.
Awesome. All
So
right.
yeah, so that's Agnes of Dunbar. So
Yes,
cool.
and that's badass, and that's the entire idea of Badass of the Week in general is, keep going, just don't give up.
Well,
So,
an individual, like an individual who is just internally powerful can make a difference. And it's so
yeah.
easy to feel overwhelmed and to think, okay, there's all these forces opposing me. There's all this change and chaos going on, especially right now.
Mhm.
And if you just be strong in who you are, you can affect change, even though it just feels like you're that one little guy in Tiananmen Square, right? But that
That guy made
guy
change.
made change, and
That guy
that
influenced
image,
history.
yeah, he changed history just by standing there with his little shopping bags, going, "This isn't no further,"
Yeah,
And
he was just annoyed. Like that's why I love the Tiananmen Square story, because that guy was just like walking home with his groceries, and he's like, it's tanks again. I've been there where I've definitely had days where I was walking home with my groceries, and if I saw somebody rolling up with a tank, I'd be like, yeah. I'm not moving. You move.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so man, all right, we are going to take another small break. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about your writing process and researching history for your books. We'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back. We are here with Rebecca Cantrel, author of A Trace of Smoke and the Joe Tesla series. Rebecca, before we told the story of Black Agnes, we were talking about your process researching history for your historical fiction books. So I'd like to continue talking about it because I just find that super interesting. So jumping way back to the start of the episode, you were talking about researching history for your books. And I'd like to continue talking about that because I think it's super interesting. So jumping way back to the start of the episode, you were talking about the Red Count, Henry Kessler, in part of your research for the Hannah Fogel books. I've been looking him up while we've been talking about this. I looked him up on Google, and he does not look like what you would picture when you hear the Red Count. I'm picturing like a fighter pilot. I'm picturing like Richtofen, right? And he's wearing he's like a tall, skinny guy. He's wearing a suit. He's got this like very well manicured mustache, and he's wearing this big white Panama hat. And it's like, the way you're describing him is like, for Badass, I write about a lot of people who are famous for snapping other people in half with their bare hands. But this guy was the kind of guy who actually sounds like you would have wanted to hang out with, more so than some of the people I write about.
Everybody hung out with him. And that picture, you're probably seeing that painting of him, right? I think that was done by Edvard Munch, who did The Scream. And he also did a portrait of Harry Kessler. Like he's that plugged into everything. He's so cool. And so then there was Bella Frome, who wrote Diaries of Bella Frome, Blood and Banquets. And she was a reporter. So my character was a reporter. So I definitely wanted to read Bella's stuff. And Bella does show up in the books. And she was this amazing reporter. She was part of the nobility again. They lost everything in the inflation of 1923. And she became a reporter for the Vossische Zeitung, and she was like the society reporter because she hung out with all the society people, including later Hitler and Lenin. But she was also Jewish. So as things get darker, Bella Frome helps Jews get out of Germany until she has to flee herself. And her daughter was a fencer swimmer who was going to go to the Olympics until Hitler came to power and said no Jews can compete. So she escapes to the U.S. and then has to work like in a glove factory and as a typist and as a maid. And, it kind of has this completely different life in the U.S. and then writes and publishes her memoirs. So there's just all this and there's the music, there's Kurt Weill. I mean, Mac the Knife, that was written in 1928. That was played on the radios in 1931. And then there's movies from that era. So M with Peter Lorre, which is about this child serial killer in Berlin in 1931. It's one of the first talkies. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. It's black and white. It's so spooky. And M is this wonderful black and white atmospheric movie, and it's filmed in Berlin in 1930, released in 31. So you can see what the streets look like. And then there was Berlin Symphony of a City, which was this 2-hour-long documentary about modernity in Berlin and waking up. So they wake up in the morning and they have the printing presses and the bakers and all the people going off to work. And then it's just basically a day through Berlin that's 2.5 hours long, that's beautifully filmed in black and white with cool music. And it just goes through everything that's happening. So you get to see what's playing in the movie theater, what are on the marquees of the theaters, what are people wearing, what do the cars look like. So there's just so much, such a rich amount of stuff that you can get.
Yeah. And all of that stuff matters when you're putting a story together, I imagine, because you can mention a brand of cigarettes that doesn't exist anymore, but was really popular at the time. And you can describe, oh, well, that, even when you're talking about with the documentaries, like you could say, oh, well, this building wasn't finished yet. They were building it, but you can see it is going up right now. And
exactly.
You kind of, I love that for being able to talk about details, and especially like when you're reading the autobiographies or the memoirs of some of these people, it makes it, I think, probably easier to put them into the story because you know how they would have talked and what they thought and what they were up to. So I think it probably makes it a little easier to write dialogue for them and
how they turned on light switches, what the buses looked like, what the stairs looked like all this stuff. And so when we lived in Berlin in 2012, we were living in a building from the 1890s. So and it had all of the original tile work and the original, balusters on the stairs. So we were going upstairs kind of like Hannah would have. And Berlin is this fascinating place where, there's a war that starts in 1939. And so there's a lot of buildings that I talk about that get destroyed. And then after unification in 1990, some of them get rebuilt. So when I go back to Berlin in 1990, or I went back in 2012, it's more like Hannah's Berlin in a way than the Berlin of the 80s when I lived there was. So it's this kind of weird everything remaking. So there's a hotel called Hotel Adlon, which is in a lot of movies. It's in like a Liam Neeson movie, and it's right by the Brandenburg Gate, Brandenburger Tor. And Hannah goes in there. There's a passageway that leads out that she escapes in. There's like a wine cellar. And after the war, the Soviets came in and it was, destroyed by artillery, and they went down, they drank all the wine in the wine cellar. Somebody started a fire. The hotel burned down. The wall comes up. They knock everything down. They install, like mines where it is. And then in 1990, unification happens. They take out the mines. They take down the wall. They rebuild Hotel Adlon where it was. And now you can go and see it. Or El Dorado, which was this gay bar that features in the first book and in the novella, Cigarette Boy. Then the Nazis took it over. They made it a Nazi headquarters. And then when I went back in 2006, it was a gay bar again, and it had like all of these paintings from the era. And the owner gave me like a menu, and it was so cool. And then when I went in 2012 to visit it again, it was an organic grocery store. And there's a documentary about it now, which would be great. Would have been very useful back then. Because it was such a center of life. It's called El Dorado. It's on Netflix. So so there's all that kind of primary source material, which was very useful for the Hannah books. And then but when I did and for the Tesla book, so the Joe Tesla books are set in modern times, and the main character is an agoraphobic guy who can't go outside. And he has this very cool apartment that's right under Grand Central Station that he goes up and down in an elevator through the clock. So everything kind of has to be connected to that, which seems easy for the first couple books.
Yeah. But by book 4, you're like, they don't make documentaries on every grocery store in 1930 Berlin.
So, but it's very cool. So there's a car down there, FDR's train car that he rode back and forth from New York to Washington, D.C. And he had his own.
I know it's in the book, but I didn't know that was a real thing.
It's real, and it's just rusting. And it led to this special station underneath the hotel, and he would get out, and then he could take his car. It was that big of a hotel, an elevator, and himself, and he could go up to the hotel. So nobody would see him in a wheelchair. And so nobody, could bomb him or get to him while he was doing that. So there's kind of cool historical stuff everywhere you look underground. There's a lot of stations like the City Hall station that were built that are beautiful that were then shut down because they couldn't widen the track for the modern cars or blah blah blah. So there's all this kind of historical stuff, and there's people down there. You're not allowed to go, but there's lots of like urban adventurers who are down there walking around filming stuff. And once again, now that's on the internet, so you can kind of see through
that
their
happens
eyes and hear it.
So I know they do that. So Seattle has an underground, and I think
I want to go there.
Minnesota does too. And it's interesting because a lot of that stuff's closed down, and it's like not even safe to go to some of those places. But you get guys with GoPros who run around down there and take video of it, and that's so interesting. There's like these large sections of major cities that are completely unexplored and abandoned. It's really interesting.
So for those, there was stuff, but then I did the stuff with Rollins, and that stuff is set from the time of Jesus with Lazarus all the way forward to now. And so I have like Rasputin, I have Elizabeth Bathory, and it's much
go all over the place with those.
Harder to get primary source material, right? Although Elizabeth Bathory, oh my God. So, she was the Blood Countess.
Yeah, we did Elizabeth Bathory for a Halloween episode, I think last year. And we put her and Vlad Dracula together, and that was a really fun episode.
Well, they were related. Did you get the letters? So her brother-in-law wrote the letters of what it was like when he came into that house to arrest her.
Yes.
And it is just horrifying. Like, there were dead bodies everywhere, women in cages and in various stages of being tortured. And you're just like, but the use of that is to really see from the eyes of the people who were there then. And I think for history, you want to do that because it's very easy to say that history is inevitable or that it's, a series of events, but it really isn't. It's a series of people doing things, people living in the world, looking at it a certain way and doing their best to achieve their goals, evil or
That's
otherwise.
That's the thing that comes up a lot when I do this, because you kind of think it's easy to think of people from the old days being different, right? Things were just different back then. And it's like, okay, yeah, things were different back then, but people haven't changed that much. Like human beings are human beings, and they have always been, right? And, maybe they talked a little bit differently back then. They had access to different technology. They liked different stuff, but like human beings haven't fundamentally changed very much in their hopes and dreams and desires and all of that stuff. And so, getting into primary source materials, and you can read people talking about like, oh yeah, I got to do my laundry, and I had this for lunch today, but I don't really like it. Stuff like that is really interesting, and it works really well if you're going to put it into a book. So I guess one of my questions for you would be, like, like I said, I've never really written historical fiction because like I feel like I dive so much into all of this stuff that I'm like, well, I don't know how to put a person into this world now because I know everything that happens in this world, and how do I alter it in a way to make my story work? And so I guess that would be my next question for you would be, how do you decide I'm finished with my research and now I'm going to create a story in this world?
Well, I'm never finished with my research. Let's just start that. Nice. I'm always reading. I'm always learning. I'm always doing new stuff. And I have to pull myself away because I love research. Like when I wrote the vampire books with Rollins, vampires are imaginary, but I watched every
But there's a history from. There's a really, really in-depth history. I'm sure that the Wikipedia entry for a vampire or the Encyclopedia Britannica entry for vampire is significantly longer than for many historical figures.
Yes. So I started with like John Polidori's The Vampire and just went forward, and I watched all these movies, and I just deep-ended it. And even as I was writing it, I was still watching vampires, and I wanted to get this, Rollins and I wanted to get this gothic tone in there. So Jim was like, "You're gothy," because I'd written I, Dracula, and he's like, you can bring the goth, so you need to like embrace your inner goth. So I was reading like all of this original goth literature, Castle of Otranto and Moonstone and all of this stuff from the gothy 1890s era, and watching all this goth
Going
stuff
through
like The
Angel Fire, like
Crow.
fanfiction forums.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that, but I always like try to be historical with whatever I do, and I did that, and I was watching The Crow and like the gothiest of goth, the werewolf, and like the original 1931 Dracula, like all of this kind of stuff to get into that world. So I never stop. So first off, I mean, you can't do it all day or else you won't write, but don't expect yourself to stop researching because you're going to need to find something like how did they turn on a light? And then the other thing, which is huge, is I think once you know so much and you're so excited about all the stuff, is you need to not put most of that in the book.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very easy to overwhelm people with extraneous historical detail. So my rule is I only mention it if my character would notice it, or if it's something she interacts with. So, like, for example,
The thing that I always hate in movies where they walk in and are like, "Hello, brother. How was your day?" Well, I
yes,
haven't seen you since 3 days ago when we did this crazy thing together. And it's like they would
yes,
never mention
they
that.
would
They would
never
just
do
know
that.
this
So
about each other.
you want to avoid exposition dumps. And I did Hannah's first person, but in the later books too, you really want to only, like when you get in your car, you don't think about how you start your car. You just start your car and you leave. It's not an important part of your day. Where you're going might be important. If you get in an accident along the way, that's important. If you have an interesting passenger, that's important. But the mechanics of driving are not something you need to describe, even if it's like driving a cart or, a horse-drawn carriage or getting on a bus that they haven't had for 100 years. You can't put that in there unless it's really, really crucial to the story. So I went through and kind of did that and then took a bunch of things out. So I know it so that all the details are right and it's authentic and I can have her interact with the world, but I have to not put it. So I did for every book, I would say maybe 5% of what I got from my research gets into the book.
Wow. Yeah, I find that happens with me with the nonfiction stuff too. I always kind of refer to it as panning for gold. Just kind of review all these sources and you just take the good stuff. And it's like not always, it's a lot of hard work for sometimes very little
yes,
final text in the book.
But it matters. And the third thing I would say is write author's notes at the end so that you can deviate from history. You feel I feel like when I write a historical novel, it has to be historically accurate as much as possible. And I do not lie. So like Quentin Tarantino makes all these alt history things and people do that, but that drives me insane and I won't do it. I will only put down stuff that is true. But sometimes I do deviate from history. So like in the Hannah Fogel books, there's historical characters like Bella Fromm, Sefton Delmer, Anström, Eiche. There's like a whole bunch of people that exist in the real world that exist in the books. And they did things in the real world, but they did not interact with my character. So I will say, here's this character, say Anström, he did do these things that I talk about in the book, but obviously he didn't interact with my character. And here's where, that would be deviation from history. So that gives me permission to have that level of history in there, even though it isn't real.
Okay. All right. I think that's a really good way to do it. And I like the idea of having author notes at the end so you can kind of call it out to the reader.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned being gothy. The new book is called It Wants Us Alive.
Super gothy.
I haven't read it yet. I read the description, I read the back jacket, and I know the title and I saw the artwork and it looks gothy.
Could it be any more gothy? There's a giant angel, a giant corrupted stone angel on the cover. The artwork is fantastic. I got David Cullen from Cullen Film to do the artwork, and wow, he really knocked it out of the park. I was very excited.
And this just came out, so this is like really recent, right? I have it on my queue for
2 weeks ago.
So okay. So let's talk about the new book. What's it about?
Okay, so this is very gothy, and I have to confess, it's my least historical book.
Okay.
So it is set in modern times with supernatural elements and some call-outs to history. So it's kind of I write about things that scare me. And one of the things that scares me is aging, being an older woman, becoming invisible, having your body fall apart, because it's all happening to me.
Yeah,
And if
same
I'm
here.
lucky, it's going to keep happening to me, right?
Yeah, best
That's like
case
the
scenario.
best case scenario. Exactly.
My arthritis in my knee gets worse.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, I guess I hope I can live long enough for this
Mhm.
frozen shoulder to just dominate my life for 30 years. And so I wanted to talk about menopause and about women getting older. Now, this is not a menopause book. The main character is menopausal. She does have hot flashes. They were not as integrated into the book as I would like, but it's there. So I was talking about that. And the other thing that scares me right now is the othering of people and the polarization that comes from that. And the fact that we don't really know what anyone else is thinking or why. And we
Yeah.
think we do, and we make guesses, and we move further apart, and bad things happen. So this is also kind of like a metaphor book.
Very, very timely.
Yeah. So in this book, the main character is on a revenge quest. It starts out and she's in this room covered in blood, almost dead, and her partner is dead, and she vows to go after the demon that killed him. So in this book, there's
Romantic
these
partner or police
police partner. Police partner. So she's a demon hunter. He's a demon hunter. And she was once possessed by a demon and fought it off. And when you do that, and usually you could only do that if you're a child, and when you do that, there's like a scar wherever it entered your body that you have for the rest of your life. And that scar can sense the presence of other demons. And so you become a seeker and you search for demons. So she's going to go and find that the demon that tortured her and killed her partner. And so it's a revenge quest. And she starts out very, very vengeful. And they give her like a team of Marines to go down into this one training cave place because that's been taken over by the demons. And she's very much not interested in anything but the demon. And so it's the course of that is her figuring out why and what happened and what's going to happen. And so I give her the coolest tools because I'm a nerd. So she has a harp, and in ancient Ireland, the harpers went into battle with warriors to like inspire them. Like we had drummers and fifers, they had harpers.
Like a bard in D&D or something.
Yeah, like a bard in D&D. So they had lyres and they would play, but like they would do it while people were hacking and slashing all around them.
Huh. Yeah, because I mean, I've come across that with Brian Boru. They have the Brian Boru harp. It's the harp on the Guinness cans, but it's a real harp that was related to the High King Brian Boru of Ireland. It's on display at the university in Dublin.
Trinity College.
Artifact, Trinity College. And so, but it's an interesting item to carry to battle with you because it's a two-handed use.
so she has a harp, and when she plays the harp, the demons can respond to it and come out and be dealt with. So that's her role, as she finds demons and she tries to kind of calm them out of the body, and they don't know why they leave, and they don't know if it bothers them, if it soothes them, if it reminds them of what they are. They don't know or they don't know where the demons come from. You will by the end of the book. So she has this harp, and everybody else gets like guns, right? So there's all these guys in body armor, and she's like, "Do you have any body armor for me?" And they're like, So that's kind of like how she is, and they have nets to net them. And then she has a harp. Then she has a falcon, and her falcon's name is Freya. And Freya is a peregrine falcon who's been trained to spot demons and react to them.
Yes, you were telling me some cool stuff about falcons when we were talking before the episode, and I'm very excited to get into the falcon component.
So I went into falconry, and falconry is very cool. It has its own vocabulary. There's all these words that mean something to falconers that mean, that you have to learn about jesses and mantling and stooping and like all these kind of really cool, and I love really cool new words. So, and then it's giant killer birds, right? So
They're big.
falcons,
Falcons are big.
they're big. They have this giant wingspan, and they were used in the olden days to hunt for prey. So like they didn't. You were royalty, so the royalty people would have these falcon pens and cages, and they would have a guy who took the falcon master who took care of them, and then they would take the bird out, and they would have a little hood over it, and they would let it go, ride on their horse with their falcon, and then they would let it go, and it would kill a hare or a pheasant or whatever, and they would bring it back and eat it.
You see that in a lot of medieval art. They'll have they'll go on a hunt, right? And the king and the lord and the lady of the castle, and they ride out with their huge entourage of people and the dogs and all of that, and they chase out foxes or pheasants or whatever, and they'll hunt. And you do see a lot of women involved in this, even in the artwork from the time period. Like it was a sport of like the nobility, but you do see, sometimes you'll see the guys out there with his bow and arrow, but she'll have the glove with the falcon on it, and it becomes this really cool symbol of power and female empowerment. Okay, Rebecca Cantrel, thank you so much for being on the show. I had a really fun time talking to you, talking about Agnes and your books and your process. Thank you so much. Can you tell us where people can find the new book and more of your work, and where you are online?
So I'm at RebeccaCantrel.com, and I'm on Blue Sky as Rebecca Cantrel. And the book is everywhere the books are sold. So it's Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble. You can get it at your local library. You can order it at your local bookstore. So it's everywhere where books are sold. There's no audio version of it yet.
I have it on I can add it I add it to my wish list. So at some point it'll come on. I do so many more books on audiobook now than I do in physical.
Yeah, my son does too. So yeah, but I have a paperback version and I have an ebook version. So yeah, enjoy it however you love books. Just read more books.
All right. The book is called It Wants Us Alive by New York Times bestselling author forever, Rebecca Cantrel. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Stay badass. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.